Okay, moving on. Now, in the prior episode, I began to talk about famed economist F.A. Hayek, as he is a great jumping off point to get into this reigning propaganda that economic competition is the most optimized state of affairs. In 1944, deeply influenced by World War II, Hayek wrote his classic work, The Road to Serfdom. And while he may not be a household name today, he was long ago. And the premises in this book are at the root of modern free market philosophy and dogma. One core idea is that anything dealing with so-called central planning, a command economy, or whatever vague phrase people wish to use when describing what they assume is the quality of anything but free market capitalism, not only can't work, in his view, but also leads to deteriorated conditions of freedom, liberty, and human rights. Hence the phrase, the road to serfdom. And one of the core reasons he argues all of this is that he considers the competitive function, the competitive element, as the glue that holds it all together. It is competition that ultimately facilitates the invisible hand of Adam Smith, fostering spontaneous order and self-regulation while ensuring human liberty. And you hear this line of thinking everywhere, all the time today. Every time somebody complains about something going wrong in the market, someone inevitably chimes in and says, "Oh, we just need more robust competition." It's one of the greatest catchphrases, in fact, of all time, particularly in the libertarian community. In the words of F.A. Hayek himself, "It is of the utmost importance to the argument of this book for the reader to keep in mind that the planning against which all our criticism is directed is solely the planning against competition, the planning which is to be substituted for competition." Now, before we go into how a collaborative function, collaborative dynamics, a collaborative economic system can most certainly compensate for the assumptions of what competition is magically supposed to do in markets regarding being what is produced, consumer preferences, how value is designated, how distribution unfolds, and so forth, let me quickly take issue with the very idea that economic competition is the best way to secure freedom, liberty, democracy, fairness, and all the rest, as promoted and implied by Hayek and a whole subclass of libertarian culture today. Can you recognize the glaring fallacy of this idea? I'm not sure if there's an exact term for it, but I think it would be something like the means contradicting the end phenomenon. The means contradicting the end fallacy, I don't know. Invoking a simple, well-established philosophical rule that is empirically supported, highlighting self-defeating methodologies. In other words, you can't fight your way to peace. You can't enslave your way to freedom. You can't oppress your way to justice. You can't conquer your way to unity. You can't divide your way to harmony. And you cannot compete your way to equality, freedom, liberty, democracy, equity, fairness, and the like. Albert Einstein famously once said, "Peace cannot be kept by force, it can only be achieved by understanding." Just as Dr. Martin Luther King once said, romantically, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." This is also foundational of Gandhi's nonviolent resistance movement ideas, which he termed Satyagraha. And I know someone may say, well, that's just poetic idealism. No, it's not. We see the outcome of this contradictory thinking everywhere all around us. People say things like, well, if the United States didn't drop the atomic bomb on Japan, there wouldn't have been peace and the end of World War II. A dubious assumption in and of itself if you know the history. But what has been the actual result? Every technical power in the world has moved to develop its own nuclear weapons now, fostering an even more delicate and dangerous situation, given that today there are enough nuclear warheads to destroy the planet thousands of times over. And back to Hayek as an aside, he was very consistent in his character with this kind of fallacious thinking, because he was also in favor of the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet after the 1973 overthrow of democratically elected self-proclaimed Marxist president Salvador Allende of Chile. All the capitalists could recognize in this country was, of course, evil socialism, just as they do today, which is code for any threat to Western capitalist power and profit. Hayek actually stated that he saw this dictatorship of Pinochet as a necessary step to, you guessed it, a move to a more free society, invoking, of course, the need for free markets to be implemented. Even if those free markets, which are supposed to be the root of human liberty and social freedom, are to be governed by a murderous dictatorship, as was the case with Pinochet. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. So coming back to my main point, as far as competition as this balancing, liberating force, it is logically ludicrous to argue that everyone constantly fighting each other for strategic dominance, which is the essence of competition, building power hierarchies, will somehow magically lead anything to the very nature of what competition incentivizes in and of itself, which is disregard, abuse, autocracy, oppression, indifference, apathy, subservience, exploitation, and so forth. And the world you see around you is the result.